Our story unfolds in a secluded part of the American landscape, where rolling hills gradually give way to the rugged, untamed expanse of the Bridger National Forest. Here, nestled in a small valley, was Whispering Pines Ranch, a place that felt both a part of civilization and wonderfully, thrillingly separate from it. This was home to 18-year-old Clara. Clara wasn't your typical teenager. While others her age might be engrossed in social media or city lights, Clara found her rhythm in the whisper of the wind through the pines, the gurgle of the creek that bordered their property, and the silent conversations she shared with the wild. She had a spirit as open as the skies above the ranch, a quiet strength, and eyes that held the observant calm of someone who truly saw the world around her. And then there was Comet. He was an extraordinary member of the household, a living paradox in this North American setting. He wasn't a pet in the conventional sense. Their connection was far deeper. Years ago, Clara's parents, dedicated wildlife rehabilitators, had received an urgent call about an orphan cheetah cub, found weak and alone after a poacher's intervention gone wrong, part of an ill-fated exotic animal trafficking scheme authorities had intercepted. Against all odds, with the right permits and a secure environment on their secluded property, they had saved him. Clara, then a young girl, had been instrumental in his recovery, her gentle presence soothing the traumatized cub. He'd grown into a magnificent creature, a symphony of tawny, spotted grace, his slender frame built for breathtaking speed. Comet lived in a large, specially constructed enclosure offering space to roam, but his most cherished moments were spent with Clara. Under her family's careful guidance, a deep and unique bond had formed. He wasn't tame like a house cat, but he was trusting, fiercely loyal to Clara, and understood her moods and commands with an almost eerie intelligence. Their daily routine often involved long walks on their expansive property, Clara on foot, Comet loping gracefully beside her, sometimes on a lead, sometimes allowed more freedom under her watchful eye. Their daily routine often involved long walks on their expansive property, Clara on foot, Comet loping gracefully beside her, sometimes on a lead, sometimes allowed more freedom under her watchful eye. He would often recline in a patch of sun while she sketched or read, a silent, powerful guardian. He would often recline in a patch of sun while she sketched or read, a silent, powerful guardian. One crisp autumn afternoon, the kind where the air is sharp and clean and the leaves are a riot of gold and crimson, Clara was doing just that. Her parents were away for the day, attending a conference a few hours' drive away. The ranch felt quieter, the silence punctuated by a distant crow and rustling leaves. Clara had taken her sketchbook and a thermos of warm cider to a favorite spot on a gentle rise overlooking their pastures, a place she called Eagle Knoll. Comet lay nearby, head on his paws, amber eyes half closed, but his ears twitched, ever alert. The sun warmed her back, and a sense of peace settled over her. This peace, however, was fragile, about to be shattered. A battered pickup truck, one Clara didn't recognize, had been seen sputtering along the county road earlier. Its driver, a man named Jonas, was a drifter, his face etched with the kind of desperation that makes a person reckless. He'd been casing the area, looking for an easy mark, and the isolated Whispering Pines ranch seemed to fit. He imagined an empty house, perhaps cash or valuables. He had no idea about the cheetah. Jonas parked his truck a good distance away, hidden by trees, and approached the ranch house on foot with furtive stealth. He found a back window unlatched and slipped inside. The house was quiet. He moved quickly, rummaging through drawers in the study, pockets of coats in the hall. His frustration grew. There wasn't much of value immediately apparent. Meanwhile, up on Eagle Knoll, Clara felt a sudden, inexplicable shiver. Comet lifted his head, a low rumble starting in his chest, his gaze fixed towards the ranch house. Clara frowned. "What is it, boy?" she murmured, stroking his sleek head. He didn't relax. He rose, silent as his namesake, and took a few steps, his body tense. It was then that Clara saw him. Jonas, exiting the house, a canvas bag slung over his shoulder, his expression a mixture of disappointment and anger. He hadn't found what he'd hoped for. He spotted Clara then, a lone figure on the knoll. A new, uglier thought began to form in his desperate mind. A witness, or perhaps leverage. He started towards her, his pace quickening. Clara's heart leaped in her throat. This wasn't a friendly visitor. Comet let out a soft, warning growl, stepping in front of Clara, his body low to the ground. "Stay back," Clara called out, her voice trembling slightly but firm. Jonas, startled by the cheetah, but more driven by panic and a dawning, malicious idea, didn't stop. He was a gaunt man, but wiry, and his eyes had a wild, cornered look. "Just stay calm, girl," he rasped, his hand reaching inside his jacket. He pulled out not a gun, but a nasty-looking hunting knife. "Your animal there, it stays put, or you get hurt." Comet tensed, a more serious growl vibrating through him, but Clara put a hand on his flank. "Easy, Comet, easy." She knew, with chilling certainty, that if Comet attacked, Jonas might harm her, or Comet, or both. The cheetah, for all his power, was still vulnerable. Comet tensed, a more serious growl vibrating through him, but Clara put a hand on his flank. "Easy, Comet, easy." She knew, with chilling certainty, that if Comet attacked, Jonas might harm her, or Comet, or both. The cheetah, for all his power, was still vulnerable. Jonas was now just a few feet away. "You're coming with me," he said, his voice rough. No noise, no trouble. Fear, cold and sharp, lanced through Clara. But beneath the fear, a steely resolve began to form. She had to think. She had to survive. "Where are you taking me?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Just a little walk. Up the hills. Insurance, you see," Jonas sneered, gesturing vaguely towards the forested slopes that rose behind the ranch, towards an area known locally as Hawks Peak. "Your folks got money?" Before Clara could answer, Jonas moved with surprising speed. He grabbed her arm, his grip like iron. Clara cried out, a sound quickly stifled as he clamped a rough hand over her mouth. Before Clara could answer, Jonas moved with surprising speed. He grabbed her arm, his grip like iron. Clara cried out, a sound quickly stifled as he clamped a rough hand over her mouth. Comet lunged, a blur of spotted fury, but Jonas was expecting it. He kicked out viciously, catching the cheetah on the shoulder, not hard enough to seriously injure, but enough to make Comet yelp and stumble back for a crucial second. Comet lunged, a blur of spotted fury, but Jonas was expecting it. He kicked out viciously, catching the cheetah on the shoulder, not hard enough to seriously injure, but enough to make Comet yelp and stumble back for a crucial second. Comet lunged, a blur of spotted fury, but Jonas was expecting it. He kicked out viciously, catching the cheetah on the shoulder, not hard enough to seriously injure, but enough to make Comet yelp and stumble back for a crucial second. In that instant, Jonas was dragging Clara away, pulling her roughly towards the dense tree line at the base of the hills. "Don't try anything stupid, girl." "And you," he yelled back at Comet, who was now crouched, snarling, torn between attacking and Clara's unspoken plea in her wide, terrified eyes. "You stay back, or she pays." Clara stumbled, her mind racing. She had to get away, but how? Jonas was strong, desperate. He half pushed, half pulled her into the woods, the familiar trails now seeming menacing and alien. She risked a glance back. Comet was at the edge of the trees, a picture of frustrated rage, his growls echoing softly. He couldn't follow directly without risking Jonas panicking and hurting her. Her heart ached for him, for herself. The ascent was brutal. Jonas knew these backwoods, it seemed, or was simply driven by a panicked need for seclusion. He forced Clara upwards, through thick underbrush, over fallen logs, the ground growing steeper. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her legs burned. She tried to subtly scuff her heel, break a twig, anything to leave a sign, but Jonas's grip was too tight, his attention too focused on her. Back at the edge of the woods, Comet paced, his initial explosive anger giving way to a focused intensity. The scent of Clara was strong, but it was mingled with the acrid smell of her fear and the alien, threatening odor of the man. He whined, a low, distressed sound, his intelligent eyes scanning the path they had taken. He knew he couldn't charge in. The man had a weapon, and Clara was vulnerable. He had to be smarter. He lowered his head, his incredible olfactory senses taking over. The ground held a tapestry of scents, but Clara's was the one woven in threads of gold, the one he could follow anywhere. And intertwined with it, the kidnapper's scent, sharp and distinct. He began to move, not with the explosive speed he used in play or chase, but with a silent, deliberate purpose. He melted into the undergrowth, a phantom in the dappled sunlight, keeping parallel to the direction Jonas had taken Clara, relying on the wind to bring him updates, and on the ground to tell its story. Clara, meanwhile, was being pushed to her limits. The sun began to dip lower, casting long, eerie shadows through the trees. The air grew colder. Hawks Peak wasn't a single summit, but a series of rugged, wooded ridges and small, hidden valleys. Jonas seemed to be heading for one of the more remote parts. He was panting now, his initial burst of adrenaline wearing off, replaced by a jittery nervousness. He kept glancing back, muttering to himself. Just a little further, he grunted, pulling Clara over a rocky outcrop. Nice quiet place. We'll wait for your rich folks to call. Clara knew her parents weren't rich, not in the way Jonas imagined. They lived comfortably, but their wealth was in their love for nature, their work, not in piles of cash. This realization sent a fresh wave of fear through her. What'd he do when he found out? She focused on her surroundings, trying to memorize landmarks, a uniquely twisted pine, a distinctive rock formation, the sound of a hidden stream. Her feet were sore. Her arms ached from Jonas's grip, but she refused to let her spirit break. She thought of Comet. She had to believe he would find a way. He was smart, so smart. As dusk began to paint the sky in hues of purple and gray, Jonas finally stopped. They were in a small, dark hollow, almost a ravine, shielded by a dense thicket of rhododendrons and overshadowed by a looming cliff face. An old, dilapidated lean-to, probably left by hunters years ago, sagged against the rock. "This'll do," Jonas said, shoving her towards it. He produced a coil of rough rope from his bag and, despite her struggles, managed to tie her wrists loosely to one of the lean-to's rotting support poles. "Don't get any ideas. I'll be right here." He sat down a few feet away, the knife resting on his lap, and took out a squash sandwich from his bag. Clara tested the ropes. They were coarse, biting into her skin, but he hadn't tied them expertly. There was a little give. Hope, small but persistent, flickered within her. She listened to the sounds of the forest settling for the night, the chirp of crickets, the distant hoot of an owl. And then another sound, almost imperceptible at first. The faintest rustle in the leaves, too deliberate for a foraging squirrel, too light for a deer. Her heart began to pound, not with fear this time, but with a wild, desperate hope. Comet had been relentless. His paws, designed for the open savanna, were sore from the unfamiliar, rugged terrain, but he pressed on, driven by an unwavering instinct. The scent trail was a lifeline, pulling him forward. He moved with an incredible stealth, using every scrap of cover, his spotted coat making him nearly invisible in the deepening twilight. He could smell Clara's distress growing stronger, and it fueled his urgency. He navigated fallen trees, scrambled up steep inclines, his powerful muscles working tirelessly. He was a hunter, and his prey was the man who had taken his Clara. He reached the edge of the rhododendron thicket. The scents were overwhelming here. Clara's fear, sharp and immediate. The man's nervous sweat, the stale food. He could hear the man's low muttering, Clara's quiet, controlled breathing. Comet sank lower to the ground, every muscle coiled, his mind assessing the situation with predatory precision. He could see Clara, tied, her face pale in the gloom. He could see the man, fidgeting with a knife. Clara, feeling that almost imperceptible shift in the atmosphere, risked a tiny glance towards the thicket. For a heartbeat, she saw nothing. Then, 2 points of gold ignited in the darkness. Comet's eyes, burning with a cold fire. A wave of relief, so profound it almost buckled her knees, washed over her. He was here. Jonas, oblivious, took a bite of his sandwich. He was starting to feel the strain. The kidnapping hadn't been planned. It was an act of pure desperation, and he was already regretting it. He just wanted this to be over. That's when Comet chose to act. He didn't explode from the bushes in a dramatic charge. Instead, he emerged like a wisp of smoke, silent, fluid, impossibly fast. One moment the space beside Jonas was empty, the next, Comet was there. He didn't make a sound, not at first. He simply stood, a magnificent, terrifying apparition in the dim light, his body radiating pure, lethal intent. Jonas looked up mid-chew. His eyes widened. The sandwich dropped from his hand. For a long second, he was utterly frozen, his mind struggling to comprehend the sight of a full-grown cheetah materializing out of nowhere in this remote wilderness. He'd briefly seen the animal earlier, but at a distance. Now up close, it was a different story. Then, Comet let out a sound. It wasn't a roar. It was a low, guttural, sawing growl that seemed to vibrate the very air, a sound that spoke of ancient, primal fury. It was the sound of a protector whose most precious charge was threatened. Jonas scrambled backwards, crab walking away, his face a mask of disbelief and terror. Get back. Get that thing back, he stammered, his hand fumbling for the knife he'd laid aside. Comet took another step forward, his lips curled back from formidable teeth. He wasn't attacking. He was controlling the space, a silent, deadly chess master. Clara knew this was her chance. Adrenaline surged through her. She twisted her wrists against the ropes, the rough fibers scraping her skin raw, but she barely felt it. The knots, hastily tied, began to give. Jonas finally grasped his knife, brandishing it wildly. "I'll gut him. I swear I will." Comet ignored the knife, his golden eyes fixed on Jonas's, an unwavering stare of pure intimidation. He feinted a lightning-fast movement to the left, and as Jonas flinched, expecting an attack from that side, Comet moved with breathtaking speed to the right. He didn't maul. He didn't need to. With a powerful swipe of a paw, not with claws extended, but with the solid impact of his foreleg, he struck Jonas's knife hand. The knife clattered away into the undergrowth. Jonas yelped, clutching his wrist, his bravado instantly evaporating. He was no match for this creature. Jonas yelped, clutching his wrist, his bravado instantly evaporating. He was no match for this creature. It wasn't a shout, but Comet let out a sharp, distinct chuff, a sound Clara knew well, their signal for action. Her hands came free. She scrambled to her feet, her legs shaky but obedient. Comet didn't take his eyes off Jonas, but he shifted his body slightly, creating a clear path for her to escape the lean-to. Clara didn't hesitate. She darted past him, out of the oppressive little hollow and into the relatively more open woods beyond. "Comet, come!" she called, her voice choked with emotion. Jonas, disarmed and terrified, simply stared at the cheetah, who remained between him and the direction Clara had fled, a formidable, growling barrier. Comet held his ground for another few seconds, ensuring Clara was clear. Then, with a final, contemptuous snarl, he turned and bounded after her, melting back into the trees as silently as he had appeared. Jonas was left alone in the dark, his hand throbbing, his grand plan in tatters, trembling not from the cold, but from the sheer, unadulterated terror of his encounter with the wild. He wouldn't be pursuing anyone. He just wanted to get out of these woods. Clara ran, fueled by adrenaline and relief, Comet loping effortlessly beside her. She didn't know exactly which way to go, but she headed downhill, hoping to find a familiar trail. Comet, his senses once again guiding them, nudged her gently with his head, correcting her course, leading her with an uncanny certainty. It felt like an eternity, but eventually, the trees began to thin. She saw a light, a familiar light. It was the beacon on top of the old water tower at Henderson's farm, a neighboring property, though still a couple of miles from her own. Tears streamed down Clara's face now, tears of relief, of exhaustion, of overwhelming gratitude. She sank to her knees, burying her face in Comet's warm, musky fur. He nuzzled her, making soft, rumbling purrs deep in his chest, licking away her tears. He had done it. Her incredible, brave Comet had saved her. They made their way to the Henderson farmhouse. The lights were on, and old Mr. Henderson, a kind man who had known Clara all her life, nearly jumped out of his skin when he saw her disheveled state, with a cheetah calmly standing beside her on his porch. Explanations tumbled out, interspersed with sobs. Mrs. Henderson fussed over Clara, bringing her a blanket and warm milk, while Mr. Henderson called the sheriff. He also managed to reach Clara's parents, who were already frantic with worry, having arrived home to an empty house and signs of a disturbance. The sheriff and his deputies arrived quickly. Clara, though exhausted, was able to give them a coherent account of what happened and a description of Jonas. A search party, guided by her directions to the general area of Hawks Peak, was organized. They found the dilapidated lean-to, the discarded knife, and signs of Jonas's panicked flight. He didn't get far. He was picked up early the next morning on a back road, looking haggard and defeated, trying to hitch a ride out of the county. He confessed quickly, still shaken by his encounter with what he described as a demon cat. When Clara's parents finally arrived at the Henderson farm, their reunion was emotional. They hugged Clara tightly, their faces etched with relief and the fading terror of what might have been. When Clara's parents finally arrived at the Henderson farm, their reunion was emotional. They hugged Clara tightly, their faces etched with relief and the fading terror of what might have been. And they looked at Comet, who sat patiently by Clara's side with a new depth of awe and gratitude. He was more than just an animal they had rescued. He was a member of their family, a hero. In the days that followed, life at Whispering Pines Ranch slowly returned to a semblance of normality. But something had irrevocably changed. The bond between Clara and Comet, already profound, had been forged anew in the crucible of fear and courage. It was a bond that spoke of loyalty that knew no bounds, of a connection that defied easy explanation. Clara would often sit with Comet on Eagle Knoll, her sketchbook in her lap, but her gaze would linger longer on the forested slopes of Hawks Peak, no longer with fear, but with a quiet respect for the wildness it held, and the wild, protective heart of the magnificent cheetah beside her. The world might see him as a dangerous predator, an anomaly, but Clara knew him as Comet, her friend, her guardian, her savior. And their story, whispered on the winds through the pines, became a testament to the extraordinary courage found in the most unlikely of friendships, a tale of how, sometimes, the deepest connections are the ones that truly run wild and free and prove to be the strongest of all.